I want to talk about something that only few videos ever seem to bring up when it comes to talking about The Walking Dead Season 2, and that is Kenny.
You're gonna whoop me? You and what homo parade?
Guess who up in this bitch? Catch who ducking his flip.
Kenny is one of the most complex characters we get to see throughout The Walking Dead, along with the only one who we've seen in previous seasons. This is important because we have history with him in this season. Not to mention, he was mostly seen as a ride-or-die character for Lee in Season 1, until he isn't. Because Kenny only seems to ever go with you to help save Clementine if you've stayed by his side for basically the whole game. I might not agree with everything Kenny does. He's rash and reckless sometimes, but it was his bold spirit that pushes you through and gives you hope. But once Kenny loses his wife, there's nothing left besides a bitter man who doesn't know what to do with himself anymore. His whole world revolved around his family, and then they're just gone. For the rest of the game, he tries to cope by drinking. I can't blame the dude. He has every right to need a good gin martini right now, but it leads to some more tension between Kenny and Lee that the player can either work around or just make matters worse. And when it finally comes to saving Clementine near the end of the game, this line really irked me during my first playthrough.
I keep asking myself, if this was me, asking you for help, asking you to put your life on the line, would you be there for me? Because there have been plenty of times you ain't been.
Bro!
And ever since then, you've been looking out for yourself more often than your
No! You mean Clementine? I'm sorry that you were wasting away drinking half the time that you forgot I have people to look out for besides you, Kenny. I think the thing that triggered this to happen was the fight that I had with Kenny on the train when I tried to get him to stop it. I'm not sure exactly what I did wrong here to cause this. Maybe I had a bad dialogue option or something. Same thing kind of happened when I threw a statue head at him in the attic.
I wasn't gonna hurt you. Sure, pal. I know.
The funny thing is, I was 95% sure Kenny was still going to come with me, even if we had our moments. Okay. But even if Kenny doesn't care for Lee as much anymore, shouldn't he still care for Clementine's safety? Why can't we look past our differences for once and come together to save the only thing that's really worth fighting for now? Hope. Clementine is the embodiment of hope, or at least she is our light. She gives us a reason to fight and keep going. But okay, moving on from that, Kenny still has some redeemable moments. Like near the end of the game, if you haven't had a terrible relationship with him, he decides to sacrifice himself either for Ben or for Krista. I ended up getting the route where he goes and sacrifices himself for Ben, and this just is a really big character moment for him because Kenny never takes action, at least not in Season 1. So this was definitely a good step up in character development since he normally bullies Ben half the time, and honestly, I kinda can't blame him. As well as Kenny urging you to go find Clem instead of staying with him, all around leaving us with a pretty good impression of Kenny and the final moments that we see him in Season 1. Now, moving on to Season 2, we finally meet up with Kenny again. And honestly, I think about what would have happened if we never ran into Kenny in the first place. Maybe he would have never been wrapped up in the whole Carver situation. Maybe Sarita would have never died. And his group could have stayed safe. But that's a whole other can of worms. The thing that I start to notice right off the bat with Kenny is that he seems closed off. He struggles to talk about his feelings or the past, even with his girlfriend of 2-ish years. Sarita at this point kind of just feels like a replacement, just to fill in the void in his heart from losing his family originally. But since Clem is the only one who knows about his past, she's the only one who can properly reach to him in his moments of stress. I see Kenny as a father figure for Clementine. He would do anything for her and would never lay a finger on her, but of course, this doesn't rid him of his flaws. He's dangerous and doesn't think things through. His anger can get the best of him, and if you tick Kenny off, he can say some pretty hurtful things.
Truck's empty.
First off, we're in it, so it ain't exactly empty. If you don't want to help, then just say so, okay?
Jeez.
I'll do it myself.
I did what I thought was right. It was all I could do.
All you could do. Because of you, Sarita is dead. And you're telling me you did all you could do. You think because you're a little girl, you can just get people killed and no one will care?
Whoa.
That because you're sorry, it'll all magically go away?
Being with him was like being with an abusive father. We know he has a good side, but what happens to Clem if he gets too angry? Like I said, he would never hurt Clementine, but his actions could lead to it affecting her death indirectly. We end up taking care of him a lot throughout the game too. He ends up separating himself from the rest of the group, putting her in a dangerous position as she's being alienated from other people who could keep her safe. But of course, there's other people who affect Clem too, Luke and Jane.
I almost forgot what. Clementine!
Whoa, hello?
Jesus, Clem, it's just not.
Jane is all about survival and isn't a huge fan of groups, but attaches to Clementine because she reminds her of her sister, or at least what could have been. You see, Clem has been able to hold her own and prove herself as very useful. Not only does the group look to her for help, but is heavily put down as being just a kid. And I believe Jane sees her for what she truly is, useful, but she doesn't seem to care much for other people, not even what Clementine feels emotionally. Everyone else is a deadweight unless you can fend for yourself. And then there's Luke. I may have a personal bias towards him because he reminds me of the relationship I have with my own older brother, but that's besides the point. We see Clementine and Luke have a lot of heartfelt moments together, and his death hit me really hard. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have his own flaws, but I would have much rather picked him if it was between him and Kenny. He's more kind and just easily approachable. But I can't think of an altercation between Luke and Kenny that would ever cause them to go into a fight of the death. And I think this is where Jane comes in.
Oh, the feeling's mutual.
You know the thing about people like you, Kenny? You're just a bomb waiting to go off. Everyone talks about you behind your back because they're afraid of you.
That ain't true.
Mike, Bonnie,
true. Damn it.
Sarita,
Fucking liar,
Whoa.
that ain't
Well,
true.
Sarita,
everyone around you knows that sooner or later they're gonna end up dead. Sarita knew it. I know
Whoa,
it.
no,
and
no,
so
no,
does
no, 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 no,
Clementine.
no, no.
Your final decision is to then pick between two horrible people. Shoot Kenny, or let Kenny kill Jane. Jane is just as manipulative as Kenny. She just shows it in a different way by shoving Kenny to the brink of a breakdown to a point of wanting to kill her.
You have to trust me.
No,
You're gonna see what he
I
really
can't.
is.
What? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Jane knows Clem won't leave Kenny unless he's either killed or does something so despicable that she leaves him. Jane is technically supposed to be our get-out-of-jail-free card from Kenny's abusive behavior, but she herself is also an abuser for pulling such a stunt. If Jane truly cared, she would have tried to at least wait until they weren't in such a dangerous snowstorm to maybe try and figure things out. But no, because she wants to prove a point that we already know. And I think that Kenny knows this most of all too. If you decide to shoot or leave Kenny, he tells you that it's the right thing. So what's there to take after everything that's happened? Whether you ran off with Kenny, killed him, or left him, what is left for us to decide? I think, although it's not exactly said, Clementine is going to vow to never be like Jane or Kenny, or at least never be that for AJ. And one thing that amazed me throughout all of this was how hellbent everyone was on loving Kenny no matter what he did. Now I'm not saying you can't be a fan because he is badass on his own right, but to be so clouded by that heroic image of him in your head that you can't even see the abuse going on right there is just scary. I'd say the best ending would be Kenny getting Clementine to safety at Wellington and then leaving, because then he recognizes who he is and that he can't keep them safe. You'd probably think I'd like the ending where Clem goes lone or both Kenny and Jane are killed based on everything that I've said, but no. Either way, Clem is distraught and alone in the end like she was after season 1. To end this video, I want to state one more thing. I don't hate Kenny. He's a man who was broken piece by piece with the world he was thrown into and turned him into a monster. And believe me, he has every right to be so angry, but he puts it on everyone else and can't blame himself for his own behavior until he is on his literal deathbed.
But when I look at Kenny now, he seems broken. Broken people get reckless. I know you got a history with him. Look, I think he's a good guy. At least started as a good guy.
You're right.
He always tries to do the right thing, but he's not the same anymore.
Exactly.
I'm glad you see it too.
And in the end, Kenny dies no matter what path you pick, but his memory will always remain in Clementine's heart, for better or for worse.